Alright lads, I'm not even gonna try and sugarcoat it. This video is mostly an excuse so I can talk about Iron Man and how great it is. That won't be the whole video. I'll talk about other superhero movies too, but it's mostly for Iron Man. But I just didn't want to make the whole video about Iron Man because I don't know, I just didn't want to. And honestly, I like superhero movies. I know a lot of people say that they're overdone, and they are, but when they're done well, I really think that they can be some of the best and most entertaining movies out there. So today I'm just going to talk about a few that I really like. Keep in mind that these aren't in any particular order. I'm sort of just basing it off what I find most interesting. And these also aren't all of my favorites, just like 3. First up, I'm talking about Batman, because who doesn't like Batman, especially now that super sexy Robert Pattinson is playing him. I've noticed that Batman is sort of one of those characters that I've liked more and more as I've gotten older. I think when I was younger, I didn't really like him that much. Probably because he was one of the few superheroes that didn't really have any sort of superpowers, which is kind of ironic because now that's actually what I find most interesting about him. I guess since Batman lives in a world that mirrors our own, the issues at hand feel a lot more grounded than something like, the Avengers, where you have giant metal space worms flying around New York City. And as someone who's lived in New York, I can tell you that that only happens like once a year. But I want to talk about the best Batman film. I said the best Batman film. Perfection. I know this is probably going to be a hot take, but what can I say? I find the Batman more enjoyable than The Dark Knight. That's not anything against The Dark Knight. I'd still put it in my list of like top 10 favorite superhero movies of all time. I just think that the Batman is slightly better. Honestly, I think one of the Batman's best scenes is actually the first scene of the movie, where we start with this ominous POV of someone spying through a window on a bunch of little kids. The first time I saw this movie, it was actually in a film class for school. And when I saw this, I thought that we were seeing Batman's POV. But then it took me a moment and I was like, well, if this is Batman, why is he spying on a bunch of little kids? I mean, I get that he's a billionaire and all, but still. And equally strange to that is the music and sound effects. There's this deep breathing while the song Ave Maria plays in the background. I can't play it in the video, so I suggest you just watch the movie if you haven't already, and the same goes for every movie I'll be talking about on the list. A lot of the Batman's sound is noteworthy. I mean, it did breathe new life into something in the way. Music is used very carefully in this movie, and rarely is it just a background noise. And I think part of that is simply due to just how good the music is, but also just how well it fits in this scene. A few minutes later, we find out whose POV it was, and it turns out to be the Zodiac Killer. Alright, not exactly. It turns out to be the Riddler, and honestly, this moment right here is really good. I said a minute ago that the movie had great sound, but also equally good is how the sound is used. Silence is used very effectively in the movie. This movie knows when to put sound and when to allow for a moment to just breathe and not have any sound. And something I wish more movies nowadays would take note of. I also like this shot here where we see that the roof window is slightly open to let us know how the Riddler got in. It's some great visual storytelling. Something also to note about this movie is that it's a lot more character driven than other Batman films. Honestly, part of this film is just as much a character study of Batman as it is a crime thriller. Despite this, we rarely actually see Bruce Wayne. I think part of that is because Bruce Wayne as a person doesn't really exist much in this universe. In the film, we get to see just how exhausting being Batman really is, and the mental and physical toll it takes on him. It gets to a point where it seems like he's spending the majority of his time as Batman, which causes Bruce to sort of just fade away. The times where he isn't wearing the Batsuit, he looks disheveled and uncomfortable. There's a great moment of acting by Robert Pattinson here where it kind of looks like the light is hurting his eyes. Like I said, really good visual storytelling. I guess if I had to bring up one issue with the film, it would be that I think it kind of drags near the end of the second half. I get that it's supposed to be a slow burn and all, but I do think it could have been shortened a little bit. It's not a huge problem, but I guess it was worth mentioning. Now this is the part where I talk about Iron Man. Because like I said, I really like this movie, and I've been blue-balling myself by talking about Batman up until this point. Every time I rewatch Iron Man, I'm surprised at just how well it's able to accomplish everything it does in just a 2-hour run. So you have to remember, this is the film that set up the MCU. They have big shoes to fill, and it does so pretty well. It's honestly surprising just how well the film is able to weave together all of its different plot points and have it end without feeling too convoluted. I think part of that is because the movie wastes practically no time getting started. Like, the movie begins, we get a little introduction to Tony Stark, and then 5 minutes later, he almost dies, and then a few minutes after that, he's walking around and punching people like he's the fucking Terminator. And my gosh, we have to talk about this scene. I love the way Iron Man is basically a tank in this place. He's a lot more iron than man here. And like, look at him. He just chases after them like a robot. And like the way he stumbles through the hallways here like my dad after coming home from the bar. This is a horror movie from their perspective. And it's actually shockingly brutal for a Marvel film, which, come to think of it actually, a lot of this film is a lot less kid-friendly or like light-hearted than the average Marvel film today. I mean, there are parts of this movie that feel like straight-up body horror at points. I think a lot of modern Marvel films tend to lean more into the fantasy element of superheroes. Iron Man doesn't have all that many Iron Man doesn't really have that many fantasy elements. It's really a pure sci-fi, and it's crazy that only 4 years before this, we had Spider-Man 2 and his Pizza Time. I also love how the suit looks mostly practical here. Like, this is something that I could believe was built in a cave with a box of scraps, especially when the person in that cave is Tony Stark. Anyways, he then goes outside, lights everyone on fire, blows up the base, flies away, and then crash lands into the desert. The next scene that I want to talk about is the scene with the Mark III, specifically the suit up. If you ask me, no Iron Man suit up scenes match this, both in terms of the visual quality, but also the significance in terms of the story. I don't think that many people will argue that no matter what, this is just a really satisfying scene to watch. But you know what makes the scene even better? It's just how much aura Tony has in this scene. I think this moment is a great end to this arc of Tony's character. Tony's whole story up until this point has been about his pride and the consequences of it. He built these weapons, the weapons kill people, and now Tony is feeling the weight of it. In this scene, we get to finally see him start taking responsibility for the things he's caused. And the narrative here is really tight. I think Iron Man's pacing is close to perfect as you can get for this kind of movie. Every time one plot point is resolved, another one opens, and they all sort of culminate in the final battle where Tony faces off against his uncle. The movie ends off with one of the best fight scenes in any superhero movie. After Obadiah goes all American Psycho and gives Tony open heart surgery, he gets into his Gundam suit and chases Pepper through the facility in a scene reminiscent of that first scene with the Mark I. She gets outside and calls Tony and is all like,
I'm in danger!
Only for Obadiah to burst through the ground like a zombie. Obadiah then was literally ready to shoot her in the face right here. Honestly, I think this woman's reaction here was completely justified. Imagine if you came across two Power Rangers in the middle of the highway. I think it's very reasonable for them to panic. Keep in mind, this was before the Avengers. People in the Marvel universe weren't used to that stuff yet. Now, I have a really small criticism, but I've never really understood how Obadiah survived the fall back down. I know this suit is able to fly, but it requires activating his weird rocket shoot boot thingies, which take a little while. I really like how this scene is a lot of Tony just outsmarting Obadiah. This movie really does highlight just how intelligent Tony is. I mean, in the two moments in this movie where he's in the most danger, in both instances, he uses his wits to outsmart his opponents. I could talk about Iron Man a lot more, and maybe one day I actually will make a whole video on it. It depends. And I can't end this video without talking about at least one of the Spider-Man movies, especially because I think most of them are actually not bad. But for this video, I'm going to talk about No Way Home. I don't know if it's my favorite Spider-Man movie, but it's probably my favorite live-action one, at least for now. I think part of that is because No Way Home tends to just be better paced than a lot of the other movies. Spider-Man movies have struggled a lot with pacing in the past, and a lot of the time it's because the films tend to bite off a bit more than they can chew, like putting in multiple villains where it struggles to handle just one. And while No Way Home does feature a bunch of villains, in fact the most we've seen in any Spider-Man movie to date, the difference is that all the villains we're seeing are already established, meaning the film doesn't have to worry about giving us their motivation or backstory, which frees up a lot of screen time to be focused on Peter. And when the villains do decide to enter the story, I think it actually does a pretty good job. In particular, Green Goblin stands out in this movie, particularly due to just how good of an actor Willem Dafoe is. Tom Holland also gives a pretty good performance, and one of my favorite scenes is the fight scene between Peter and Goblin in the apartment. There's one shot in particular where you can sort of see that Peter looks surprised after punching the Green Goblin, as if he's like surprised that he did it. If you look back through his previous movies, Peter hasn't really faced a foe as dangerous as the Goblin, at least not alone. Sure, in Civil War, he went up against Captain America and Winter Soldier, but in that scenario, he wasn't alone, and those guys weren't really trying to kill him. I mean, Cap even talks to him like he's a dad talking to some other parent's child at a baseball game. Vulture and Mysterio weren't exactly opposed to killing, but that wasn't exactly their main goal. They more just wanted Peter out of the way, and if he died, oh well. But here, Goblin is actively trying to kill Peter. It didn't matter if he didn't have to, he would still, just for the hell of it. Peter isn't really used to going fist to fist with an enemy, so I think his shocked expression is quite fitting here. And later in the fight, there's that scene where he tackles the Goblin into the wall and is punching him over and over. And you can see Peter's face that he's not holding back at all here. He knows he's fighting for his life, and the Goblin just laughs at him. And then here, Peter just his face goes blank as he realizes there's no chance of him winning the fight, and then Goblin slams him through the fucking floor. So Peter decides to try and make a run for it. He climbs out onto the side of the building only for the lizard to show up out of nowhere, grab Peter, chuck him through the window, and then Goblin's just chilling there on the other side. He picks up Peter and body slams him through several floors. I guess their bodies are just heavy enough to do that. Aunt May's death hit pretty hard, especially since the movie kind of makes it seem like she might live for a second. I liked how they just allowed the scene to breathe for a moment. I know I'm not the first person to talk about it, but the scene directly after where Peter is in the rain and we get that slow pan across his face is one of the best scenes in the whole movie. The scene with all the Spider-Man talking at the Statue of Liberty was really good too. It's a fun moment of fan service because the filmmakers know how special this is for the audience. It's kind of funny because a few years prior, the idea of having all three Spider-Men in a movie would have seemed impossible. But now with Into the Spider-Verse being canon in the same universe, it really seems like anything is possible at this point. They could say Pixar was canon in the Marvel universe and I wouldn't be shocked.